Hey everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad Gustafson and I share two books that we love and we think you should read when, Brad?
Right now.
Right now. Do
Was
it
that
now.
authoritative? Was that
Oh,
believable?
yes.
All
Oh,
right.
absolutely. I'm right there with you. So, speaking of reading, what have you been reading this week, my friend?
Okay, so I'm gonna share a book talk, but first I want to do I don't know if disclaimer is the right word. Lots of the my favorite books in the world have been shared by you. Okay, so thank you for that. And today is no exception. So I'm gonna double down on a title that you've shared with me that I just need to share with everyone. But I also went on the hunt recently, and now I'm currently reading a book that you'll hear about in the very near future, Jen. And I'm so excited to be able to, in the future, try to return the favor because I feel like you have enriched my life so much that I got to return it. But that's not today.
Can I
Today,
just pause and say I love this teaser? Like I
okay.
love the way you're just like setting up today for success, but
Yep,
then being
yep.
like, but guess what? There's even more to come. I love it.
I feel more like my teenage son saying, "I'll pay you back soon. I'll pay you back soon." But anyway, here we go. So the it's funny. I left my see if you recognize this, Jen. I left my dust jacket somewhere. So this is the book I'm going to book talk. You might recognize it, maybe you don't. Knowing you, you probably do. But the title, I was seeing it everywhere online on social media, and it always caught my attention. But it was a little confusing to me. And the title happens to be The First State of Being, The First State of Being. But now that I've read the book, I love the title. I didn't exactly know what it meant. I love it. It means, to me, it means living in the moment. That is the first state of being. It's not worrying about or wondering about tomorrow or 10 years from now or 1,000 years from now or yesterday. It's being fully present. So with that said, the story, I'm very nostalgic, like I think a lot of people are, but I would wager that on the continuum of nostalgia, I think I'm fairly far along. This story takes us back, or a lot of it happens in and around and right before Y2K, which for anyone who remembers that era in our history, a lot of people were worried about when the clocks or when the computers clicked over to the year 2000. Are the computers going to be wiped out? What's going to happen? So the main character, his name is Michael. He hangs around a lot of older people. At least that's kind of the way that I would describe. And so he has a crush on his babysitter, and he kind of shows up wishing that she would take him maybe a little more seriously, or I think she does take him seriously, actually. She seems like a good friend to him, but she just doesn't take him seriously in the way he wishes she took him seriously. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track, but Michael lives at Fox Run apartment complex. And one of my favorite things, I'm just a sucker for this. It's a little shallow, Jen, so this is part confession. If a book has a map in the beginning, it automatically gets an extra star on my ratings because I love being able to see the world in that way, whether it's fantasy, sci-fi, or the first state of being. So there's a diagram of Fox Run Apartments, and I love how it labels the different homes and complexes, but then on some of them it names who lives there. So as they're talking about the characters, I found myself flipping back to see, just their proximity to one another. Um, Earlier on, when I started talking about this book, I talked about the timeline saying parts of the book take place leading up to Y2K. And as you shared a couple weeks ago when you introduced this book to me, it is a book that has some time travel in, and it's really well done. I always knew I loved sci-fi, but I think another thing I found out about myself, I don't I don't just need to geek out on like heavy futuristic robot neuro space travel. Some of my things that I love most about sci-fi are when it's, what's the word? Loosely crafted in and not overwhelming the narrative. And there was a recent Newbery winner that did that so well. We book talked
The Last
her
Quintista.
yeah, book talked her books too, and I just think artfully this would fit that category where it's a part of the story, but it's just woven in so expertly. So there's so much I want to say, but I think I just really kind of need to take the easy way out and say you got to read this now. It's The First State of Being. I made a big mistake while I was reading. I was going to tweet out and maybe even tag Kelly. How do you say her last name?
It's Erin Entrada-Kelly.
Thank you, Erin Andrade-Kelly. Um, there's a part in the book that was so well crafted. I just geeked out. I couldn't believe it. And how silly of me. I didn't have a pen. I didn't mark the page, but I'll just tell you about the part. Because parts of it happen in the future, some of the narrative is kind of like a computer processing a transcript, that a conversation that happens, hundreds of years in advance, and it's just documenting the conversation. But there's a part where Michael, back in Y2K, is having a conversation, and then he goes and something really poignant and powerful happens, and he looks to the answer machine and thinks about it. And then sure enough, the next chapter magnificently dovetails into the transcript in the future. It's not linked to Michael or the answer machine, but I just thought she had to have planned. Like, it was just ridiculously powerfully beautiful on a deep level. So that was more about the craft of what she was doing. So I could go on and on, Jen, but I just want to thank you for sharing. And like I said earlier, I'll pay you back soon, Jen. I'm going to pay you back soon.
I could talk forever just about that book. Like, we could just make this an episode about The First State of Being if we wanted to, because it is definitely one of my favorites of the year. But there's a reason why Erin Entrada-Kelly has won the Newbery and has been a Newbery honor. Like, she is, I think, one of the most gifted writers for young people working today. Her books always have that air about them of like a classic. Like, you can imagine people 20, 40, 60 years from now handing these books to kids, and because they're timeless, they have that like quality about them. And I also just feel like she has such a gift for crafting stories that adults like you and me can sort of appreciate the artistry of it, while also being stories that kids' hearts are just going to attach to. Sometimes those two things are hard to get in the same book. Sometimes there are books with lots of kid appeal, and adults maybe don't see the artistry in them that they want to, and vice versa. There are some books that adults really love, and kids are like, huh? So getting both of those things in one book is, I feel like, lightning in a bottle, and Erin Entrada-Kelly just seems to be able to get that time after time after time, and I just really appreciate her.
Yeah, well said, Jen.
All right, well, I love that you shared this book this week. I feel like I'm sort of in, if I could misquote or sort of mention Taylor Swift, I feel like I'm in sort of my Brad Gustafson reading era, because I keep coming across books this year that I feel like were written for Brad Gustafson. Like, I just feel like every time
and it's getting a little expensive too, by the way.
no, I'm just like, oh my gosh, Brad is going to love this book, like, over and over and over again. And I feel that way about the book I'm going to share today as well. Also, I love this book because it reminds me of, like, if I can be self-indulgent for just a second, it reminds me of when I first became a librarian. Like, a lot of teacher librarians, I was a classroom teacher before I became a school librarian. But when I transitioned to that role, I also moved like 250 miles away from the place where I'd been teaching and living for a decade prior. So I moved to a new town, and it was a new school. And I was used to, being part of a teaching team. So becoming the one librarian in the whole building, like, I was lonely, like, that is just part of it. Plus, not going from feeling like you're really at the top of your game in terms of your craft to feeling like you don't really know anything, all of that. It was a hard year for me. And one of the things that kind of helped me get through that year is that I kept in contact with a student who kept sending me books. I would get like a package in the mail from this student with a book, and often it would just have like a note that said, like a post-it note that said, "Thought you would like this." or can't wait for you to read this, or something like that. Like, and then we would just email back and forth about these books. And that part of that year is a super fond memory for me, like this relationship and the connection we had about story. One of the books that the student sent me that year was a book called A Tale Dark and Grim by Adam Gidwitz. Now, do you happen to know that book by any chance, Brad?
I do not.
Okay, so it's a retelling of like the Grimm fairy tales. It ended
Mm.
up becoming like a whole series, and I think they made a Netflix show out of it. Like it's become really, really popular. But when that book was sent to me, it was Adam Gidwitz's first book. And I remember when we were writing this email back and forth about it, me and this former student, the title of the email was The Pacing, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, because this book was paced in a way that I had never really seen in kid lit before. It was like fast paced and funny and had tons of cliffhangers, and like you tore through it, you know? It reminded me of, you know, a Rube Goldberg machine where you like hit the one domino and everything just falls. Like that's what his books feel like, is a Rube
Jen,
Goldberg on paper.
my middle name is Rube Goldberg.
Well, there you go. Okay. So that's what Adam Gidwitz's books feel like. And I have been a fan ever since. So the book that he came out with, a new book this year called Max in the House of Spies. And I'm not gonna, it's one of the few times I'm not gonna be able to show the physical book because I've already given it away. But I pulled up the cover to show you on here. And this book is a little bit of a departure from the other Adam Gidwitz books that I've read because it's a historical fiction. Ding, ding, ding. Brad Gustafson likes him some historical fiction.
Mhm.
And it's about a kid named Max who lives in Germany at the onset of World War II. He's German, and his parents send him away via the Kindertransport, which was a real thing, to London in order to save his life so that
Mm.
that way he won't be stuck in Nazi Germany. What we learn is, and this again is true, is that very few countries would accept Jewish refugees, and those that would only accept a limited number during that time. So Max's parents, who love him, can't go. London or England will only take children at this point, and only a few of them. So Max has sort of won the lottery in terms of his ability to get to England, but his parents get left behind. And Max, of course, is incredibly worried about them and wants very much to get back to Germany. Turns out Max has got a couple of things like sort of that are going for him. First, he is sort of a wunderkind. He's got all these special skills when it comes to radios. Like he's
Mm.
kind of this genius. He can, you know, put and build radios out of just like seemingly unrelated parts, and he can turn them into like a household radio into a machine where he can hear broadcasts from Germany and stuff. He's really good with electronics. And then also, he ends up being, his foster family in London ends up being not only this really wealthy family, but also a family that's full of a really sort of eclectic cast of characters that includes a British spy. And as a result of this, they recruit Max to be a spy to send him back to Germany so that he can spy on the Nazis and hopefully find his parents. Now, there are some, first of all, there's like some magical realism in this book. Ding, ding, ding. Brad Gustafson's going to love that. There are two like sort of mythical creatures that are part of the Jewish folklore tradition that accompany Max around, and they're hilarious. And also, there's just a whole cast of characters that support Max along the way that are both funny and also rooted in real people that we learn about in history, and that also make the things that Max is fighting for more worthwhile. It's all of that like sort of packaged in a way that is 100% Adam Ginwitz. fast-paced, cliffhangers, clever writing, Rube Goldberg on the page. This book is super thick, and I read it in like 1.5 days
Oh,
because
wow.
it just, you can't stop turning the page. It is
Hmm.
so fun. And the best part is it's part of a duology. So it ends on a super cliffhanger, and you're just like, what? But we're going to get a second book, and I can't wait for it. I loved it so much. It like sort of called back a time of nostalgia for me, while also making me think about my friend Brad Gustafson, because I know this is a book that would live in on the bookshelf, your bookshelf in my heart. It's called Max in the House of Spies, and it's by Adam Gidwitz, and I think you should read it right now, y'all, right now.
That's incredible. I love the email heading that that person sent you. Fast. That's just the energy and the
Yes.
vibe. Hey, can you hold your book up once more? Your
Yes.
This is the difference between you and I, Jen. You go the extra mile to give the people what they need, and I show a blank book. All
Turn
right.
it over so we can see the spine one more time. There we go. Woo! I love it. I love it. Oh,
Yeah.
I love this book, both books.
Yeah.
I love this little show. I love you. Where can our 3.5 viewers, who I also love, find more information about our little show in our archive,
Well,
Brad?
here's where I hang out when we're not together. I go to readthisnow.net, and that's a true story because I literally go there, if I'm doing recommending books or helping with workshops and stuff, I have to look up past books and
Yes,
stuff. So,
I love
good
it.
stuff. Yep.
Thank you, my friend, and thank you all. We'll see you next week. Until then, happy reading, everyone.
Thank you.